Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the DIP Energy Launch. Our guest today is Martin Bailey. He is Chief Technology Officer of Global Graphics. We're going to discuss with him today about workflow automation. Great to have you here, Mr. Bailey. My name is Knut Wassermann and I'm Editor-in-Chief of Graphische Revue. And why are you exhibiting here at the Drupa Innovation Park? I mean, the Drupa Innovation Park is for young companies, for startup. You're quite an established company, and I would say.
Well, we are established in many ways. We're well established in the CTP, traditional print space. But if you think about the way digital production has grown up over the last 5 years, there were some innovators, some people selling product that could perhaps be best described as a concept, a way into the market for early adopters. Until about 5 years ago, that was the case. In fact, one of the things that struck me at this show is this is where digital has grown up, where there's as much finishing equipment on the booths as digital production presses. You can do a full workflow now, and it's all fully integrated off the shelf from the vendors rather than having to do a lot of the work yourself. So that entire industry is innovation in action. And what we did several years ago is to take the well-known Harlequin rip and split it into two. So we have the Harlequin server rip, which we still sell into the traditional marketplace. We're continuing to develop that, to service our OEM partners for that. But we also split out the Harlequin host renderer as a product for pure play, high volume digital production print.
Okay. But you're focusing on the ripping process.
Exactly. What we do is ripping. It's a huge proportion of the total effort in our company is aimed specifically at providing rips as a technology component that is then built into a system by one of our OEM partners. So in digital production print, we sell a rip to, in many cases, the press vendor, and they build that into the digital front end or the press controller. So they add quite a lot of technology around ours, and we're one of those necessary pieces. You can't drive a press without a rip.
Okay, but I thought ripping, that's not a big issue anymore. I remember the times when Siebold did pages of testing have been published. Every vendor was wanted to be into this test. I said ripping, that's not a big issue anymore.
And I remember getting a big plaque up on the wall at work from Siebold because we were the first ones to get under 1 minute to rip the musician's test page. Mm-hmm. But getting under 1 minute may have been good then. If you think about some of the ultra high volume digital production presses now, look at some of the HP T-Series, T410 for instance. They've now got that running at 800 feet per minute. And if my maths is right, that's something like 7,500 pages per minute. Mm-hmm. So getting a page through in 1 minute, as we did back in the day with Siebold, really doesn't cut it anymore.
So just only with your rips, digital printing is at the stage where it is now?
Exactly. Coming back to that device, 800 feet per minute needs something of the order of 20 gigabytes of raster data per second to drive it.
Per second?
Per second.
Wow.
So you've got, 64 gig iPad? That's like 3 seconds worth of raster data driving those things. You need some serious consideration of system architecture and of highly optimized rips to drive into those.
At your booth, you say you have the fastest rip at the market. What are you doing better than others?
It really matters to us as a company. Doing print, doing rips, specifically rips, really well is the primary focus for our company. And we've spent many years focusing in on optimizing the performance. And we've recently, just coming into this show, we announced version 3 of the Harlequin host renderer a couple of months ago, and we felt that it was outstandingly fast, a step change above what we've delivered before. And we actually went to Infotrends and to the Rochester Institute of Technology to tell us whether that really was true, whether we really were as fast as we thought we were, or whether we were getting carried away by our own enthusiasm. And Infotrends have just published a white paper. I think they were in a press conference with us last week to show that it was out, and they'll be sharing it at their breakfast tomorrow morning with some figures to show just how fast we are in terms of number of, the thousands of pages per minute that you can get through a RIP in a DFE these days.
Became the development of a RIP easier because of the PDF is now an ISO standard?
Is it easier because it's in ISO? I don't think it's easier because it's in ISO. We can push in the direction of assisting people to make better PDFs. One of the challenges for a PDF vendor at the moment is that a lot of PDFs don't actually follow the specification, but because we've got so much production experience, we've been selling various versions of the Harlequin RIP now for, it must be 24 years. We celebrated the 20th anniversary at the last drupa. It's a bit like George Washington's penknife in the White House. It's had 4 new blades and 3 new handles since then. But we've got all of that production experience. We've had so many millions and millions of PDF files thrown at RIP over the years that I think we've ironed out most of the way to handle files that aren't made perhaps as well as they could have been.
Okay. Well, with this question, I try to figure out the role of Adobe, because it's an ISO standard. I guess Adobe is not that involved that much as it used to be before. I mean, Adobe always had was advanced in, not advanced in maybe speed, but they had an advantage in information, I guess. Is this now gone?
I guess that's true. Certainly it used to be the case when Adobe owned the specification that when a new version of PDF came out, the first time we would see it is when the specification was published, and we didn't have the opportunity to see it in advance. We didn't have the opportunity to feedback comments to say, this particular section isn't as clear as it should be. I can see 3 different ways that we could implement what is written here. Which one is right? Now it's an ISO standard. We have a lot of PDF experts from many countries, many companies, reading the drafts, updating the drafts, correcting things, finding those places where it's not clear. And I think perhaps
it makes life easier.
The biggest benefit of going to ISO is that there are fewer loopholes in the specification now, because more people get a chance to fix them.
Okay. What is your message at the drupa?
My message at drupa is that as we look forward, there are so many new digital production presses launched here at the show. Every one of those is trying to be faster, wider if it's a web-fed, larger sheets if it's sheet-fed, more colorants, higher resolution. And I see a lot of people concentrating on what ink heads is this using? Is this pigment or dye? What can I print on? Is it green? Is it eco-friendly? I just want to raise the flag and say that as we get to those higher speeds, as we get to higher resolution, as we get more colorants, actually you need to be thinking about the RIP as well, because each of those things increases the data rate required from the RIP. You double the resolution. If someone suddenly brings out a real 1200 by 1200 DPI press, it needs 4 times the data rate of a 600 by 600, just because there are more pixels on every page. You can always, if you architect your DFE right, you can always drive that press, however fast it's going, within practical limits that are beyond where people are looking for the next couple of years. And as long as you put enough RIPs in. Our key point, I've been talking about speed in terms of rips, but my key point is speed in itself doesn't matter. What does matter is how big a DFE do I have to put together.
Okay. Getting a little bit away from the rip.
I'm sorry, too much
No,
advertising.
no, that's okay. But if you look on a typical pre-press workflow nowadays, doesn't matter if the end is a CTP system or a digital printing machine. What are the typical bottlenecks you still see there, or what could be improved if you look at the workflow in general?
I think a lot of people have a little bit of trouble with their workflows still, in that there's too much manual intervention required as things go through. Clearly, there are places where you need human intervention. You need a human decision to say, I've got these 3 jobs that need to go out within the next 12 hours. Which am I going to do first? Which is going to be most problematic? If I can't quite get them into 12 hours, which one do I want to handle late, etc.? Am I well equipped to respond if one of my best customers comes in with a short rush job to fit into the middle? There's always that requirement for human intervention. But a lot of the time, there's too much human input required. And especially in the CTP space, as run lengths get shorter and shorter, as the expected turnaround time the customers are demanding gets shorter and shorter, then the pre-press is quite likely to become a bottleneck, because each job takes a shorter amount of time on press, but you still have to make the plates. You still have to do whatever proofing you think you need to build into that workflow. So you have to ask yourself, how do I get to the plates faster? How do I handle that proofing? Who does the proofing? Can I push that out to my customer? Are they the best place to sign off on things? How do I get something to them faster to sign off? Because actually, one of the biggest delays in workflows in CTP space at the moment is in getting the sign-off from the customer. If you're doing a proof before you go down to press, can you get rid of that? Can you move to a model where the customer has essentially signed off before it comes into you, or you build it into a web-to-press solution where they can sign off as well?
The industry is moving to hybrid environments. Are you supporting this environments? Are your RIPs supporting that?
Oh, definitely. In fact, I was being shown by one of our customers around the HP imprinting systems this morning, which is exactly that. It's printing on pre-printed shells with variable data on top. But we've been supporting that for a long time, because from the RIP point of view, there's actually no real difference between any other kind of printing and hybrid. Okay, so this particular output looks a bit empty. It's got rules and a couple of images. And this particular output looks very bare. It's just text and a couple of pie charts. Put them together on the same piece of paper, and suddenly you've got a real printed piece. But as far as the RIP is concerned, each of those started as a page in the first place, and we just handle it. It's up to the press vendor to find out how you put those things together.
When I prepared myself for the interview, I was wondering, with all the know-how, all the expertise you have in the pre-press area, why are you focusing so much just on the ripping process? Don't you have intentions to develop tools for other workflow processes?
We have OEM partners who range from light production, driving specialist, semi-industrial inkjet at one end, through the wide format market that I mentioned before, through the CTP market in small, medium, large commercial printers, through small, for all sizes of newsprint. We've got customers in medium volume, high volume, everything up to ultra high volume digital production. All of those need a RIP at the core.
But it's not always the same RIP.
Actually, I'm always surprised by the synergy that there is across the entire spectrum. That we built a very scalable RIP that can work in low amounts of memory but take maximum advantage of very large amounts of memory, that will run on a single processor core but can use multiple cores if you want it to. And I keep finding that we've just added a new feature for someone who's driving a semi-industrial 4x6-inch postcard printing device, and suddenly it proves valuable for someone right at the other end of the scale. So a single scalable RIP across the entire range really does make sense, but it means that anything outside the RIP does tend to vary between different parts of that of that sequence, and that's why we work with OEM partners to provide the rest of the systems.
If we are looking at the show, especially in the digital arena, the vendors are going more and more into industrial printing. Mm-hmm. There is almost anything what can be printed today, tiles, textiles, exactly. Even furniture. Mm-hmm. Are you following this trend?
What we've noticed has been quite interesting and very recent. Until probably about the third quarter of last year, all of that was being done using what the vendors called RIPs, but which didn't support any of the formats we think of as going into RIPs in graphic arts, PostScripts and PDFs, etc. But towards the end of last year, we saw a sudden increase in interest in handling PDF for everything from ceramics to textiles to printing on cans to you name it. Suddenly everyone realized that the tool set, the whole ecosystem around PDF provides value to handling that in the back end, because you can supply files, everyone can view them on their screens, annotate them, point out, this needs to have a trademark symbol on it or whatever as things go through the process, and then you can get high quality output with smooth curves, etc., etc. All the things we've known in the graphic arts for years and years. They're suddenly realizing that, by the way, I can change the size of the graphic that goes onto these tiles and maintain the quality, which they couldn't do using the raster workflows they'd been using.
So there is lots of opportunity for global graphics?
Definitely, I think so.
Okay. Coming to the end, if you look into a crystal ball, what do you think, how will the workflow look like in the future for graphic arts or any other industrial printing environment?
I think we were talking earlier about how workflows can be made more efficient by taking human interaction out of systems. I think a lot are going to work in that direction. I think there's going to be we're going to see an evolutionary change. We've had a revolutionary change in workflows over the last, I guess the last 5 to 10 years has been a revolutionary change in workflows towards people understanding that cutting processes out, that optimizing processes, that moving responsibility to exactly the right person at the right place in the workflow is important. I think we're past that particular revolution, and we'll be moving on to evolutionary tuning, tweaking, polishing of that kind of workflow over the next few years, and then we'll be on to the next revolution. Okay. And if I knew what that was, I would be setting up a company to do something about it.
But if you know it, you're going to give me a call.
Okay. I'll try and remember.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks.